Now there's fury in Wanganui that Stewart Murray Wilson, the man dubbed the Beast of Blenheim, is already in their community ahead of his scheduled release in a week. So how likely would he be to reoffend? Joining me now is a clinical psychologist with expertise in sexual offending and their rehabilitation, Professor Tony Ward from Victoria University. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's talk about this. The public want to know a person who hasn't rehabilitated, who hasn't shown remorse, who is of a certain age, has been in jail for 18 years, like Stewart Murray Wilson. What is the likelihood of a man of his age and record reoffending?
Well, there are a couple of things to separate out here. First of all, looking at the age. Our best research tells us that the older people get, the much less likely they are to commit an offence. Even someone who's seen to be very high risk on a variety of psychological tests. Once you hit the age of 60, your reoffending rate drops quite considerably to around 5%. So there's quite a marked drop-off. The other thing I think I'd like to comment on is that the research also tells us that people can change their behaviour, can stop offending without any therapy whatsoever. And also, strangely enough, some individuals who deny having committed an offence can still stop offending. So it seems somewhat counterintuitive, but that's certainly what the research tells us.
So how does the community, like the community of Wanganui, who have heard that he hasn't shown remorse and that he hasn't taken any programs toward rehabilitation, how can they know whether he's one of those guys that changes?
Well, I mean, as I'm sure everyone's aware, predictions are a tricky business, and all you can simply do is take account of the information that you have. And when people are seen to be very high risk and they are seen to have marked areas of concern, you put in place measures to kind of control for that. Some restrictions perhaps, careful monitoring and so on. But what you also need to think about is some sort of transition process, because if you don't have that, when a person comes off parole, they're left without being adequately socialised, without having an investment in living a pro-social life. And that's when I think you start to have problems.
So you're saying, are you suggesting that the community itself has a role to play in whether he will reoffend or not?
Certainly our best research is absolutely crystal clear here, that for order for people to desist, which is a technical term which means simply stop offending, and seek to live a better kind of life, an ethical life, a more pro-social life, they need the help of other people. And what's more importantly, they need to believe that other people think they can change. So a rejecting hostile community is not going to help that process.
So there's a bit of a siege mentality happening in Wanganui, talk of trespass notices. Can you see the plan that's being put in place for Stewart Murray Wilson working?
I certainly understand people's anxiety and fear, because I think they're not really getting all the information about risk and risk control. And I think it's going to be unhelpful, because ultimately any high-risk offender is going to get released, things are going to loosen up, and what you don't want is a hostile, unsocialised individual who has grudges. But also, it's just it's simple common sense, really. You hold people close if you want to keep an eye on them. You don't ostracise them.
What would you say assess somebody like Stewart Murray Wilson's risk of reoffending to be?
If I was assessing somebody who was 65, who had a history of high levels of psychopathy, which is basically antisocial tendencies and a degree of callousness and lack of empathy, who had a large number of offences going back 20, 30 years, I would certainly see them initially, probably you put them in the high-risk category, and then you go through your various methods, you get all the information, and you make a judgment. And what you look at is not simply their personal characteristics, their degree to which they're reformed characters, the degree to which they're empathic and open and contrite. You also look very carefully at their environment, because risk is an interaction between the person's characteristics and what's available in the environment. So you can organise the environment in such a way that a person's risk is considerably diminished. But I would take a close look at his age, or a high-risk offender's age, and I would think about whether that's diminished his risk quite a bit. It doesn't always, by the way. Some older people do commit offences, but normally they're their exception.
All right. Tony Ward, Professor of Psychology, Victoria University, thanks for that insight.